Thank you so much, Olowo-n'djo, for joining me today. Really been inspired just reading about your background and sort of the origin stories of how Alaffia started. But let's kind of hear it from you and kind of take us through the origins of the idea of Alaffia, and maybe just take us through your sort of journey before you even started the brand, and maybe what that looked like.
No, thank you, Grain. And I said thank you because you could have an impact or try to have an impact or positive impact in the community or in the world. But the impact that doesn't go far if we can't share that knowledge. So
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I'm thank you for having this platform to be able to share and to give opportunity for people like us to share our stories, to share our journey, and to hopefully inspire others to join the what I call the global collective movement
Amazing.
of trying to do good. So thank you for that, and I feel that you yourself are part of this journey. My journey, is an ongoing one, really.
Sure.
I grew up in a very small border town that's right next to Benin. So if you know West Africa, or if you know Africa in general, you know that the borders in some ways are artificial. The
Yeah.
Europeans decided to sit down back in 1885 in Berlin and divvy up the whole continent without the representations of the people. So we have those artificial borders, but we won't go there. The point is, I grew up in the border town. And why does this matter? It matters in the sense that it happened to be a route where many people either coming from Ghana or other part of Togo trying to go through Benin and then eventually end up in Nigeria for work, right? So because border town, we get to see all kind of people, and these also farming communities. So when you're in a border town, you're farming, you're selling and trading. So we're kind of trading in some ways. So I grew up in a farm. We're farmers, and why is this related, connect to the border? Is that's where I got to witness what I call the humble beginnings, right? Where I thought I was poor. And don't get me wrong, we grew up in these 8x10 room with 8 siblings, and my father has 42 children. But my mother, one thing that always stuck with me, and I said this every single day, every day that I wake up, I remember this, and she will share the little bit of food that we had with the people crossing, trying to go to and that just really stuck with me. How is it that you share the little bit that we have? And I have 2 brothers, and we're little tall people, and I'm 6'4" myself, some 270 pounds, and my brothers are bigger than I am. So you can imagine, even as a kid, we fought. So when you're taking out food and giving to passing by people as a kid, it does 2 things to you. One, it makes you feel like, well, my tummy needs it too. The other, it really, the essence of a humbleness began, and the idea of community and share with the strangers began. And I think those were instilled in me. Another thing that really, I think it grew up in the area where I grew up, and now I get to your point about how the brand got started, because everything has a foundation, and the foundation within your soul, I learned the importance of our cultural heritage through my mother. Obviously things that we farm, the knowledge of farming in the traditional manner, but even things that we wear. You can even see me today. I wear my colors. He made us feel comfortable. In fact, I didn't even go to a regular doctor until I was about 16 years old. We used traditional herbs and medicines, in part because we were poor, we couldn't afford it, and also in part because she believed that those traditional herbs are important. What I'm trying to say is that she instilled these important knowledge of indigenous way of being. So I acquired that with a sense of humility in the way in which she engaged with the community. And I want to tell you, my mother was she was what you would call almost a slave, really, an indentured servant. She lost both of her parents and ended up in Benin, where she worked in exchange for food, and came back to to Togo, where I'm from, and married my father. She is a pretty rough life that she have lived, and that's how she ended up having all 8 of us, because she never wanted to be alone, because she lost both of her parents. So fast forward, I met Rose, who was a Peace Corps volunteer and an agricultural Peace Corps volunteer in my village, which is really interesting, right? there's a young girl from America coming to teach us on how to farm, but we're farmers. We're not going to get into Americanism.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I hear you.
But nonetheless, but
But hey, something positive came out of it. At
no,
least we can
no
say that,
kidding.
right?
Yeah. She gave me two beautiful daughters today, and I'm most grateful, and I will always be grateful. By this time, by sixth grade, I drop out of school, right? Because that's what you do. You work in the farm, and I met Rose, and
How old were you at this time?
I must be about 18 years old.
Okay.
17
Okay.
years old. I was a young boy. I don't know. Sometimes I still feel like I was still 7 because I never got a chance to be a teenager. When people talk about being a teenager, what is a teenager? I don't know. I was adult from the day one.
So she comes as part of this Peace Corps program to teach what? Agricultural practices? Like what was
Yeah.
I guess her mission, I guess, at that time?
Yeah, so in Peace Corps, you have different missions. So you can either be a health volunteer, as they call it, or you could be an agricultural volunteer, or you can be within education, teaching English. But because she's a chemist, so she was in agriculture, and the idea was to try to help figure out what type of crops are the best crops. And at the time, the Germans were doing a study on fertilizer in my village because we're a farming community to see what type of fertilizer to use. And for her to make different recommendations. But as you can imagine, when you're a farming community, you're not going to listen to some 20-year-old, young lady from a college just because they have a knowledge on what to do. But, instead, you kind of look beautiful. That's good,
What were y'all growing?
We pretty much everything. We grow cassava, which is called manioc. We grow maize. But the main thing that we really grow, which are native to West Africa, is the yams. I mean, those yams can be 20-pound size, and we also grow black-eyed peas. And 99% of these was for internal consumption. So it was for just survival-based.
Gotcha.
It's hard, I try to be cautious when I talk about grew up in poverty. You are essentially surviving on a day-to-day basis, and what you're producing, we may sell some of it. In fact, we keep all the bad ones with all the bugs in it, and then we sell the good ones, maybe to buy salt, things that we can't grow necessarily. Otherwise, everything else is for just survival base, the things that we consume. And that too really teaches you on how to count your blessing, to be honest with you today. So I came to the state when Rose came back to the state, and went to the community college and learned English. I need to learn. As you can see, I like to talk. And the idea of not being able to talk was not pleasant to me.
Right.
So I want to be able to talk to folks. I also wanted to learn because at the time, I recognized, when I was going to community college to learn English, the lights would be on. And then I would have my own seat. And then the teacher shows up. And I got thinking, man, back home, not only that we don't even have a bench to sit on, we sit on a dirt floor. And then the teacher doesn't show up, and there's a light, and there's all that. All I have to do is just show up and learn. And that's my mentality,
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective for sure.
Yeah, it really is, because the contrast is so vast in some. And I also wanted to understand America, right? Because I began to see what I essentially led to creation of the brand of Alaffia today. How America is governed and how capitalism governs the world. I wanted to understand how could it be that a place like America, the lights could be on, and we have more resources in America back home, and we're so poor. So that understanding led to the critical, in some ways, in-depth understanding of a psychology of economic governance of the world, and in particular in America, that lead to what I call inequality in some ways, or external cost. And from community college, I was able to transfer to University of California in Davis, where I study organizational theory, which is essentially the study of capitalism and economics and sociology all combined. And that really helped me to really understand the global structure of economic systems and what produces wealth and what produces poverty and what societies around the world face. But I was mostly interested in women's affairs. When I say women's affairs, I look the world through the lenses of my mother, because that's all I know. She
Right.
made sure we see the world through her eyes. And to this day, she has passed away, but I still see the world that way. By the time I finished at the UC Davis, I really thought that, okay, what am I going to do as a person? And I'm just telling you, Grant, is that you may be young, but at one point in your life, you ask yourself, what are you going to do? What are you going to do, in the sense that it's very clear that where I came from, things aren't right. It is also very clear that I can see that while something may be okay in America, there's global inequality. And I also can see that something's not working, right? Why is it that poverty and gender inequality continue to be, it just, I look again, the way in which I grew up. Why? Clearly, the idea of so-called aid, I'm not saying aid is a good thing. There are times where we should aid others, and there are times where we should provide food. But I feel like Africans didn't need food bags. Africans didn't need handout. Didn't even that's not what we need. What we needed is just a fair price for our resources, and that's really where the idea and the concept of Alaffia really come to, which I can see around me that nothing is working. And so I thought, okay, if nothing's working, what am I going to do about it? I can either just talk about it, I can be angry about it, and don't get me wrong. So by this time, I began to have influence, or kind of also understood the feminist movement, the civil rights movement, the Algerian war, the decolonization process in Africa in the 60s, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, all these people, even people before that. So I began to, I study all these folks. I wanted to understand certain things about the life and the journey of American Indians, how were their life before the Europeans came to this land. I even look into Fela Kuti, and you look at all these different folks. So it was a ball of fire, man. I just thought, I thought, okay, this is a revolution, We need, and I meant revolution in a good good way. It's not about
There's different types of revolutions. For sure.
I thought it needs to be channeled to some type of a more economic system. And
it could be, a business revolution. That's
exactly.
what it's something it could be.
Definitely, and that's really how I thought about it. And to be honest with you, to this day, that's how I think of Alaffia. Think of Alaffia as a social movement that require collective movement of all people, as I said at the beginning. So not to lose track. So I thought, if all these different things in the past aren't working, and I knew that something is not right in our society, and we as humans, and particularly folks from Africa, what are we going to do about it? And what I thought was the key to two things. One is that you need to have a say in what happened to your resources. I feel like Africans will have a say. And if you don't have a say on what happened to your resources, either it's pure labor or natural resources. So when I say resources, I'm talking about even human capital. And so we don't have a say. And I felt like that was one of the key issues that is preventing us from getting out of poverty. And the other part of it is that I felt that somehow we're just trying to adopt these Europeans' process without taking into account our own traditional knowledge and the wealth of the traditional knowledge that we have for centuries and thousands and tens of thousands and millions of years, that all those is not taken into account. So I just thought somehow we need to combine these two worlds, right? It can't just be one world. I think we need to combine those two worlds. But I also look at what is feasible, because the feasibility of what you do is important. That I can't try to do something that cannot be achieved or cannot be measured.
Right.
And so when I look mothers like my mom, back home. And again, Togo was colonized by the French. They can't read or write. And I'm thinking, well, but they have a tremendous amount of knowledge. We should not be measured by the European, literature. What can we do with what we have right now and participate in the global economy? Because we have to participate in the global economy,
Yeah.
even with our own traditional knowledge. So those two key things. And I felt too that the idea of gender equality, in my view, there's many ways to achieve it. But in my view, I felt that economic establishment to women that are most disadvantaged is a step toward that. You cannot hand somebody just equality over their neck, and so you have to give them jobs that make sense, and from there they can determine what they want to do. I mean, I look at my own life, and if my mother was able to have just one more penny, we didn't make $1 a day when I was growing up. All this combined, what I want to say is that I thought that revolution is to create an enterprise that essentially will help to mobilize the resources in West Africa, and particularly in my own country, and then put those in the market. But the real goal is how do we mobilize those resources, and the outcome of the mobilizations of those resources can be reinvested back into the community, because that too is about equilibrium, right? It's essentially what I was trying to do is a model. One model is let's use the knowledge and the resource that we have. And the second part, how do we reinvest that so that the future generations and children like myself at the time won't drop out of school? It's really simple model, really.
Yeah.
But to do it with morality, a lot, now it's cool to say, hey, I have a cause, I have these. Alaffia is the cause, right? We essentially sell product to finance the cause, because any revolution needs to be financed.
Yeah. Yep.
You need to pay for it. I mean, look, all the bloody diamonds and everything. Even wars, anything needs to be paid for. So this form of a revolution and the model that I believe it can uplift the communities, and it has really.
I think the beautiful thing is that it could be funded by consumers rather than funded by governments or terrorist organizations or the illegal sale of firearms or drugs. It's just funded by consumers, right? It's simple when we say it. It's simple, right? But it's really hard to execute.
Yes.
To get the brand developed, to get it made, to get it on the shelves where consumers have the opportunity to participate in a revolution that way.
It really, you're absolutely right. Is not only that it's difficult, it's almost near impossible.
Yeah.
Because you can't see my hair, and I'm not that old, but I can tell you I have grown some gray hairs.
We only record, like I said before, we only record the audio, so no worries.
Yeah, I have grown a lot of gray hairs. I don't mind. It's fine. This is my life. But it is almost near impossible, because what I, even to start the organization, right? You needed money, and we were students, and we were living in subsidized student housing. So you want to start this whole thing. And while you're still, in fact, we got kicked out of the dorms because I didn't realize that you can't so-called business, you can't do that in a government property.
I didn't know that either.
Yeah, you can't.
Where was that at? Where was this at?
That was in Davis, California. Because we first incorporated in Davis, California. And I wanted to be honest, I went to all the student housing, these are what I'm doing. And at the time I was an RA too, residential advisor for the student housing. So I went and told my boss, I'm going to leave my job because I have found a way to contribute to my people and to make the world a better place. And she said, I love you, but you realize you can't really be doing what you're doing out of here. You better go tell the student housing to make sure that it's okay. So I went to tell student housing. They said, well, you better pack up because you can't be using the university internet for...
But what a terrible way to deny creativity and deny like that is the perfect place to do this stuff, right? When you have young inspirational people create ideas together, that should be the best place to do it.
Be honest and wanted to tell the truth of what you're doing. So we end up moving, and remember these subsidized student houses. So when you move, you feel the impact, right? It's like, whoa. everything's double out here. And really for the organization, I went to I was fortunate, and I said fortunate that the people of California paid for me to go to school. I had good grades, so when I transferred to UC Davis, most of my tuitions were paid for
Yeah.
by the people of California. And, sometimes we forget those things does matter. I mean, looking now today, I create
Or
jobs across the nation.
sometimes we never see what our tax dollars can do because a lot
Exactly.
of it's wasted. But this stuff like this, we need to see, like, this is what happens like when tax dollars are used efficiently. Like this, look how much impact is created from you as one student. Look how much impact you have created.
Thank you.
One
Really
student, right? It's amazing.
It is the return on that kind of investment.
Right.
So I was very fortunate. I will always be grateful for the taxpayers and people of California. But that what I meant is I had a ability to use student loans, right? So I student loan, but that wasn't enough to start the enterprise. So I went and got student loans, and I pay back. You can't use student loans to start a revolution, but I needed money,
Sure.
But
I know people use student loans for way worse things, though.
I pay all my student loan back, and I pay my taxes. I don't hide from them. I pay a lot. So it's okay, but even that wasn't enough. So I ended up going to a local bank. At the time, they call it the Union Bank of California, and told the bank, hey, look, I need to borrow $50,000 to add to the student loan to start a revolution. And the lady said, we don't fund revolution. We can't give loans to revolution, and that was that was right after the whole 9/11 thing. So everybody's confusing everything. I said, no, this is a revolution. And she said, no, you got to go write a business plan. And I said, no, it's not business. It's a social movement. It's a revolution. Then you got to go write one to submit for the loan. Because I just fill out a loan application,
Sure, yeah.
But we did. We so-called the business plan together and submitted. Of course, they're denied, right? Yep. And I tell you, I make a joke about this, but it wasn't funny because I couldn't understand why we're denied. Clearly, we didn't have money. So I was thinking, well, the bank will loan you money when you don't have money. But the reality is, you actually have to have money to borrow money.
But that goes back to sort of inequality hits in different ways. We always think of if it's just simply being inequality of income and all these other things, but also just the inequality of opportunity.
Yes.
The ability to do something that you want to do. You don't even have the power to do that, right? You wouldn't even have the power to have somebody believe in you. It's so weird, man. It's such a weird system. It's such a weird system.
And it's going on even today, right? We as humans, we have a long way to go. But I wouldn't give up, because by this time, you have to understand, when you're young with that much energy,
sure,
you're bulldozer, there's nothing that can stop.
You're not taking no for an answer. You're just figuring out a way for it to say yes. Absolutely.
And also, even to this day, I feel the pain of how it is to have nothing, right? Mm-hmm. Like that grinds you, the pain is so tremendous. Even though at the time I may have food and all these basic things, but inside you, your soul is still in pain. You couldn't just give up. I was actually surprised they didn't lock me up, because I would just stand there at the bank. I didn't want to go back. I would miss my classes. And the lady said, just find somebody that has collateral. And at the time, Rose's brother had a house in Oakland, California. So when Davis, Oakland, California is by San Francisco, so it's not that far. So I went to him and I told him straight out, word for word, the whole future of Africa lies on your shoulder.
No pressure, no pressure.
All you have to do is just sign right here and back up this loan of $50,000. And bless his heart, Sebastian. So how you can pay back, because at this time we haven't created a single product, nor that we haven't started cooperative. We haven't even started anything. It's
just an idea. It's an idea.
It's an idea that we just need money to go start. And I said, look, I promise you, if I'll pay back. If this doesn't work, I'll get a job. You can draw it directly from my income, but I'll get a job because I know I'll get a job. I think the worst comes to worst, I clean
Sure.
bathrooms. That's the first thing
Sure.
I did in the U.S. clean bathrooms, and so I knew that there's a way to fall back on. And and he and I will always be great. I have so many people to be grateful for, and Sebastian signed, and we got the $50,000, and that was in the summer of 2003. So I was still in school. I still had one more year left to finish my degree. So we started, and we had a baby at the same time too.
Wow.
So I was just doing all of it at once.
So you wanted to make it double hard. You
Oh,
said, I want to start a
yeah.
revolution and have a
Quit
kid.
my job, and then go home and then start. Long story short, I just went back but there were core principles of Alaffia, and those principles that we must be a majority woman. And the critical and most important principle is that we have to have at least 80% of ethnic inclusion within the organization. And when I say ethnic inclusion, Togo has about 40 different ethnicities. And there's ethnicity that end up and typically rules the country, doesn't make everybody inclusive. Even though we're so-called we're all African, but I think inclusion. I wanted to have an organization that by de facto, you don't have the actions of the organization will speak for itself.
Right.
Right. And a lot of that is how you construct the organization. And so it's in order to do that, we have to be in the central Togo. And that's also where I was looking at the feasibility in terms of the resources. That's where we have the knowledge of a woman like my mother have knowledge on how to make shea butter. And also I was really concerned about those who were born during the colonial period of time, that as women that were not given opportunity because men were given preference to go to school. So you have to be at the age of over 50 and so on. So there were all these kind of criteria to form so-called these cooperative, these entity, these organizations. And that wasn't easy, to be honest with you, because I was so excited. And then when I go to various communities, everybody's like, no. Why should we believe this young guy? Because I'm saying we can, this fair trade, you can get fair wages, we can sell these things in America, Americans will be happy, you can be happy, we get to keep our culture. And I'll show up in moped, and the folks are used to show up in Land Cruisers and stuff. So I can see why it will be difficult. But long story short, we end up with 16 or so women that said, look, let's give it a try. And I can tell you today we have 250,000 of people in West Africa that either directly or indirectly participate in collecting and making the different oils and butters that go into Alaffia. Wow. Over those years. And here in Olympia, Washington, we have our own facility, so these are American jobs as well. And so it's been a journey.
When you first maybe meet somebody or just talk about what Alaffia is, right? And I know it has a lot of different parts but it's very dynamic in everything it does, right? But at its core level, what is the brand, right? What does it do? What does it provide?
I think to me, when I think of Alaffia, it simply is a lifestyle of a way that fulfill every part of your life. What I mean by that is that Alaffia provide the basic that you need to be healthy. And the health is important. I mean, the basic you need to be healthy is soap, right? I mean, even look today, we're in pandemic, what do we need to do? We need to wash up. Yeah. So Alaffia provide those basic needs or basic necessity to maintain the health. But also it gives the health in terms of not having a product that's full of chemicals. Yeah. And I would say Alaffia provides hope, really. These about because we alone cannot change and make the world what ought to be. But what we can do is create foundation and create a sense of hope so that others can build on that hope. So to me, Alaffia is a hopeful organization that has only one objective: to positively contribute to humanity, all humanity.
Did you know when you were going to start the company that it was going to be sort of like a health and beauty brand, like, soap and oils and shampoos? Is that from the beginning, did you knew it wanted to be in that sector of business?
No. I what I did know for sure, I wanted to, remember I talked about feasibility. I wanted to use resources that we have knowledge,
Right.
right? We don't need to do import knowledge. And I wanted to participate with resources that are also eco-friendly. Eco-friendly to me means that they grow wild. Then we don't need to fertilize them. We don't need to, use pesticides and so on. So those were kind of the key basis for me. And then when we start making just the feasibility of it, remember, 50,000 don't go too far.
It grows real quick. Yeah.
And to start with that, because I didn't want to get investor. To me, the investor will prevent you from doing what is right by the society. That was just the mentality. Investors can help grow too. Nothing wrong with investors. You just find the right investors. But I don't think any investor will want to give you money for social revolution. But I was that was really the thought. But when we start making just the butter, right, just the oil, and we're selling at the time, we wanted to just sell them in bulk. I couldn't imagine making a shampoo. Shampoos are a little complex. Conditioners are complex. Lotions are complex. But oils themselves are not complex. They don't need preservative. They don't need anything. So we're just selling just the oils. But I knew quickly that was very unstable. So within 1 year into it, I quickly, because you have to remember, I cannot fail. I made promises to women back home. That's what we had to go to the library, and get a book on how to make lotion. We had to make soap and we know how to make soap traditionally, the black soap. Here in America, in our garage. By that time, we moved to Olympia, Washington, and live in this mobile home and using the garage as a place. And I just go to the street fairs, and from the fairs, so we can add some lavenders and patchouli to this. That sounds good. That's some hippie product here. Let's do that. And learning with Rose as we go, and start going to local stores. Our local co-ops are the backbone of Alaffia today. These small pot stores are the backbone, and go to chain stores, and then step by step, go into Whole Food and build from there. Then we're one, either number 2 or number 3 or sometimes number 1 brand within the Whole Foods market nationwide today. But it's just step by step, and so the lotions and the shampoo and personal care became because of survival, because of necessity, and knowing that just selling raw oils are not stable enough to maintain the promises that I made back home. I had to go to the finished product. But to be honest with you, the margins or the money is in the finished product, is not. And if you need to fund, remember the part of the model is to fund the future. And in order to fund the future, you have to invest today. You need money to do all of that. And when you sell finished product, there's more money into it than when you just sell raw material.
When you first started and you went to the women, right? And you said, hey, we actually got, money. Let's start making things. How many women were we talking about then? And now how many sort of women are we talking about now?
So I visit with, remember I wanted to do ethnic inclusion, right? So I visit hundreds and hundreds of different communities, but only 16 at a time, these 18 years ago, have agreed to participate. Because you have to look at it from their perspective. Throughout their whole life, they've been lied to, right? It was first slavery, and it was colonialism, and we have all our leaders that is very hard to trust today. So when somebody shows up, a young boy shows up and says, "Look, I'm gonna make your life better," it's just hard to believe the person. But I didn't see it. I didn't see it that way. I didn't give up. So it was about 16, and today collectively, because we work in more than one country, there's 250,000 of people in West Africa that depend on Alaffia today.
Wow, incredible, bro. That's insane to think about, right? I mean,
you have to build, right? And you can't give up.
I'm always looking at branding as very important, right? And your branding is beautiful at this point, but I'm sure along the way it has gotten to this point where it's at now. So when you were sort of early on, like you said, making those jars, selling them at the street market, how did you go? Like, was there any labels on them at that point? And then like at what point in the system you're like, okay, we need to make like labels, have colors, like have our
Yeah.
name. Like,
Well,
those little things matter,
like
you know, you don't think about it so much.
I was like colors, but at the time I didn't even understand FDA. I only understood FDA because FDA controls personal care
Yes.
too, body
Yeah.
care. Like just like drugs, but we had our own inkjet printer, and we print. I didn't know what UPCs meant, and when we did understand the UPCs, we will print the same UPC for the same product. So the product two different senses.
Right.
They're scanning, in the store as the same, but they're different. It was a learning, but you have to understand we didn't even have so-called branding. I mean, this idea of branding was
Yeah.
what is branding? To me, I have product and I have a mission, and I got to fund my mission. I got to sell the product, to be honest with you, it wasn't even 2 years ago that Alaffia has a so-called a marketing department. We were just going, man. We were just going,
Yeah.
and it's a lot of learning. So at the beginning, we just print the label and put the name of what it is on it.
Wait. I wanted to go back what you said about getting in stores, because I think when I talk to a lot of founders and just individuals in general want to create brands, right? And they want to get in, and you could sell online, right? That's a big direct to consumer is big now, right? But it's still so valuable to getting these Whole Foods or getting these retail locations. Talk about that process and what that was like to go from the farmer's market selling it to then being in Whole Foods, right? Like,
Yeah.
how difficult was that? Was that like, what was that process like?
I think it's still hard today, right? Because
Yeah.
you can't go, even today, you can't just go online and get a phone number or contact
Right.
for any of those major retailers. For Walmart, for Target, it's a very controlled environment and controlled market. And you talk about online, and I'll answer your question. At the time, we weren't thinking about online. I remember when I was in college, I wrote a paper about Amazon, how they were losing money at the time, right? How that model don't make sense, so the whole e-commerce thing was not a thing. But what I did, and you have to remember, it was really important for me the Alaffia product are in the store, a physical, right? And what I meant by that is that I wanted to show the world that African-based ingredients, African knowledge can compete at the same level as, even better than the European product. So being in the stores, being there, it was also a driver. It wasn't just about money. It was also demonstrate the possibility of what we can do. You remember, these are all about movement, man,
Yeah.
So what I did is that to be honest with you, just step by step. So when I got into the co-op, it's a lot easier to get into the co-op because the co-ops are somehow hippie in a sense. This is 18 years ago. And when your product is true, you can tell that this is a healthy product. And not only that, I was doing myself. I was doing the selling. And I can say, look, I know where it come from. I know
Right.
community where it come from. We made these. We didn't buy and sell. We made these. So the ethics are is right there. So the co-ops were able to start picking up the product, and the process we're learning. But the chain store, the chain store, when I say chain stores, is stores that have more than 1 or 2 or 3 locations. This has become a little bit more difficult. They want to know, you can do demos, are you going to spend money on an advertisement? Are you going to print here? How people can know about it? Nobody knows the name. Why would I want to sell something that the community doesn't know about? So I said, look, I can't pay money for anything, but what I can do, I can be there in person. Everybody that walks in that store, I can put a lotion or I can put a butter on their hand, they can feel it. It was literally like that. And I would just be on the road, man. I would be traveling store to store all the way to Los Angeles and Washington, back and forth. Every single store at the time that had our product, I'll be in that store. And all I can do is, if you bring this in, I'll be there to demo it. I'll talk to customers directly. It was word of mouth. It was physical. Wow. It was it was you're right. I was rarely home. I was always on the road. And for Whole Food, I would write letters. And then we start having brokers, and I write letters, and I write honest, true letters. This is why I'm doing this. This is why I think you should carry these.
Mm.
And I remember, Whole Foods is divided in 11 different regions. You could go to global or you can go to the region. Of course, we didn't have the muscle to go to global, so we went to the region. And in the regional, we were denied. It's interesting. The guy who denied us ended up working for Alaffia. So he said our labels look ugly,
back to the brand. Yeah, back to the branding. Now that's what I'm saying. It's not a problem. I mean,
brand said our labels look ugly. Let's look up to the standards, and he all of that. So what do I do? The next year I try to improve. The next year I try to, because we're designing these ourselves. We can't pay designers,
right?
And we didn't even have a so-called brand book. So what do you design to? To nothing. You design blindly. Yeah. Yeah. And then a different lady who also today works for Alaffia. It wasn't by design.
That's great.
She's been with us for the last 10 years or so, and she's give it a chance. But we'll do what's called optional approval. Optional approval at the time of the Whole Food means that we can put it in the system, but you have to sell it to individual stores. Gotcha. So at the time, individual stores made their own decision. So Whole Food, as you know, a lot has changed. And we're a global partner now, so we do everything centralized. But then, got in the car and go from store to store, because now it can scan, it's in the system, and just sold what we had, and just sold store by stores, and then and then go to a different region. I prove myself in one region that I can make them money. And you have to be thinking, you can never say make money for ourselves. You have to think making money for Whole Foods,
Yeah.
And so,
yeah.
But when you have that mentality and you understand, and I quickly start to study the Whole Food culture. And I think that's very important. You talk about branding, you have to understand your own organization culture, and you got to create your own culture. But you have to understand the culture of those that you sell the product to. Right? Those who buy a product, how they're organized, how do they treat their people, and the psychology behind the founders of those enterprises, what governs them, what matters the most to them. So all those were very important. How do you create loyalty? How do they know that you care about it? Because you have to align with their values as well, and you have your own values. Yeah. So you couldn't just go and just sell to just anybody, because you got to maintain the integrity of your own value. And at the same time, I was learning output and production. To be honest with you, I'm more of an operation person than I am more of a brand person. I can produce, I can organize and produce things, and now I'm learning how to think, to think and operate in a brand mentality. So that's and from there, from region to region, and eventually in 2008, there was a time where economic crises were happening, and I went to Whole Food Global in Austin and said, "Hey guys, look, the Lehman Brothers and all these big banks are failing. Everybody, the world's chaos, man. Let me make a product for you that's cheap," because there's a simplicity and that I think we're overlooked. When the economy is bad, when Americans are panicking, what do? They want to buy cheap product. They don't want to spend too much money, even though everything's okay. They want so like, look, I create a product, and we can come up and sell you you can retail $9.99 32-ounce lotion and shampoo. At the time, the cheapest lotion in Whole Food was about $18. So when I offer that to you, we will make zero money. All I care about is keeping the mission going, keeping the ladies going. Yep. And that gave us the opportunity to go national all at once.
Wow.
Hopefully they grew with the idea, and we went national, and we built and keep building and keep building and keep building to this day.
I want to go back to something you said. You mentioned fair trade earlier, and there's so many different thoughts on fair trade, but I want to get your perspective on it, and maybe what it has brought to the community that you see it affects, and maybe what are the positive benefits of fair trade. So when a consumer looks at that, they kind of understand what that means versus a company or brand who doesn't do it that way. Maybe just talk a little bit about fair trade, and maybe the positive aspects of it, and maybe some of the negatives, maybe what can be improved.
First, with Alaffia, we don't lead with fair trade, and the reason why I say that is that fair trade alone cannot move the needle the way that I need the needle to move. Mm-hmm. Because what is fair trade? It's really fair trade is saying,
is it minimum wage almost, right? It's just kind of saying
exactly.
Yeah.
saying, look, instead of having colonialism where we take all your resources for nothing, now we're going to pay for it a little bit, and then we're going to say we're being fair.
Yeah.
But are we really paying enough for people to really truly get out of poverty? For all folks out there, don't get me wrong, fair trade is the way to go.
Yeah, but that's the foundational. That's like base level. Yeah.
You got to have that foundation, because if you don't have that, what you have is a slavery, right?
Exploitation.
So you got to have those foundation. And fair trade also, does bring about the importance of working conditions, which I think is really important. It doesn't just look the income; it looks what kind of conditions are working on, and I think that's very important. Even look the income ratio to the top to the bottom. All of that is important. It's not just being fair, you have to be fair trade certified. I think that people are to think about, right? Anybody can claim fair trade. Anybody can say, I'm fair trade. Is it certified? That's what we need to look at. And, and for us, we employ fair trade because it is part of the model. It's not the only key ingredient of the model. It's just part of the model. But the other aspect of it, in personal care, there's not very much fair trade. I believe we're the first one when it comes to personal care. You think about fair trade, coffee and cacao and all that stuff. You're not thinking about lotions, shampoos, really. But that was important for us at the time to be able to show the ethics in the supply chain, because the abuses that happen in the supply chain. So to me, how do I communicate to the consumers that these lotion, it does not have, the essence of abuse in the process? But I think if I were to criticize any form of, the concept of a fair trade, is that the certifying bodies are not in Africa. I'm talking about Africa, right? Because different countries may be different. Yes, they have the officers and the inspectors on the ground are Africans and so on and so forth. But the owners of those certifying bodies are not in Africa. And I think that's a problem. I think that to certify, resources come from a place that you got to be on the ground. The owner, because the rules needs to be developed in accordance to the society. And when the rules have been designed in Europe, they don't always take into consideration the social norms. I'll give you one little example, even with us. Yeah. With Alaffia, when we first had our fair trade inspection, the one thing is, well, you can't have your woman bring their babies to work, right? By European standards, you can't bring your babies to work because that's child labor, or you bring children. But for our model, why should we deny a mother to have a baby, to have the baby to have her food or his milk when he needs to? Why do we want to physically separate a mother, for the love it has for the baby just because the mother wants to work? Of course, it has to be a condition where it's safe for the baby. And also, and we couldn't do that. To this day, we can't actually. It was forbidden to do that. But at the beginning, I was like, bring your baby. We even have the whole daycare. The whole thing was working. It was working just fine. The moms can bring their baby. But also, we were just wearing our colors, wearing our traditional outfits, the traditional setting. And one of the recommendations was, well, you have to have uniforms in these. That one, I stood up. I said, definitely not. Right? You can certify us, or you can pack up, go back to Europe, because we're not going to compromise on our culture and give up our color. That's non-negotiable. We need to be comfortable, and the ladies need to be comfortable in what they wear. So again, imagine if those who are developing the rules, in fact, when we first got certified, there was no rule that were or standards that were set for the shea butter. There were standards set for the cacao. There were standards set for coffee. There was no. Apparently, there was not enough abuse that was reported in the shea trade. But that's nonsense. There's abuse in every major resources that we consume in the world.
I want to talk about the women like a little bit more, and maybe not just the women, but the community in general, and sort of what happens, right, when consumers come along the revolution, so to speak, right, and buy from Alaffia or other really good brands out there, right? I want to, because not every consumer can go to the community, right, in Africa, and see the impact, right?
That's
right. But like, can you maybe just give some insight and explain like what happens to a community when consumers dive in with them and believe in the company, right? The brand, and they put their dollar into it. Talk about the changes that happen within a community, that it affects them, right? In a positive way. Like what
Yeah,
happens to a community when, you sell a lot of product, right? Like how does
yeah,
that change lives and change generations maybe?
definitely. Even before selling a lots of product, I think it benefit the consumers just as much as it benefit the producers or
Hmm.
those buying the product. And I'm saying this because what it does is that it's giving an ability, a vehicle for an individual to positively contribute to the world while they're going out about their
The
life.
normal day. Yep. Yep.
Because now all of us can be jumping around and grouping people. We all have to raise our kids. We
Yep.
have to go to work. Some has to be doctors, some have to be nurses, some have to be teachers. But what they buy and what they consume, if that it can impact the community, then is a fulfilling journey, right, for themselves, particularly if the product is healthy for themselves. So it's an ability to contribute, and I think that's very important because you need a critical movement. You need a collective, and it cannot only be what is happening in Africa. It is about the world, right? The world got to move together, and the consumption that's why governments and different entities, I don't think is the way to go. I think individuals coming together, consuming one product or various products, can lead to a critical, life-changing impact forever without even have to set foot on the ground.
Mm.
Uh, and on another side, what it does is that it changes lives. I mean, I can only speak for Alaffia.
Yep.
I know that today, because of the creation of Alaffia, we one in five child that's born in the central Togo is fully paid for by Alaffia. Otherwise, 130 women will die by giving birth. Just think about that. So one
Yeah.
in five, because of what America is buying from Alaffia, is able to essentially save a human life. This year alone, we have 800 women and we have 501 babies born, and not a single mother died, not a single baby died. I mean, you can't tell me that you can put a price to a human being's life, right? So the impact, and collectively to this day, we have funded over 8,000 women. And there's an important here. It's not just about death that's wrong, but it is also is reducing poverty. And why? The
Hmm.
reason why it's reducing poverty is when your mother died in the communities where I come from, the likelihood that the rest of the other children will go to school is unlikely. So they drop
Mm.
out. And what happened? The
Hmm.
cycle of
Hmm.
poverty continued. So the prevention of mothers dying by giving birth, given to the conditions of the poverty levels, that prevention is actually reducing poverty. And it's immoral. I said this every day. It's
Oh yeah.
immoral for human to die for basic things that we shouldn't have to die for. And then when we look at the other impact, Alaffia has more than 10,000 bicycles in distribution that are collected in the Pacific Northwest. Here in the U.S. For girls to go to school, because I know how it is to walk to school myself. So now instead of having a girls dropout, we have 90% retention, over 90% retention simply by having a bicycle in the secondary school. So
Wow.
for the girls, and that's a tremendous impact. Same with trees. We plant close to 100,000 trees today. And then we distribute more than 30,000 eyeglasses so that folks can see. The list goes on, and you may wonder, well, why are we touching every aspect? Because that is what the movement is. You have to be touching every driver of a society,
Hmm.
the health, the environment, and the education. And
Yep.
then you have the economic component. The economic component is the buying, making butter, making soap. That's the economic part. And then those other drivers are necessary to invest in for the future. And I think that, you see a lot of organizations that say, well, I do these. Well, it's wonderful. Yeah, you can build one well so that you can have social cause. But the truth is, you got to have, in my view, if you truly want to change people's lives, you got to have more than one program. And that program needs to be an ongoing program. And it has to be consistent. Because the worst thing you can do to a community is give a false promise. That is, I do this
Hmm.
year, and
Yeah.
see you again. But I get to put in my packaging that I'm doing something good. That's a false promise that is something that the community cannot rely on. But also, I think that our impact as an organization must be measurable. So in order to have them measurable, you need to conduct them over a long period of time. And then you can see the cumulative impact, the cumulative effect. And that's what Alaffia does. For 17 years, all these programs that I talk about, we have stayed consistent, and there's a team on the ground that implement and also measure it every single year. And you see that on our bottles, we're the only organization in the US, as far as I know, that every single year we will print and report the exact amount of community contribution that we do. Not in terms of dollars, but what is even more important in terms of numbers, if it's the number of trees that we planted, if the number of women that we have contributed to their health is printed, is a public knowledge. And I think that's important. That's also public accountability. You can't just do things for social cause and say, I'm doing good, but what good are you doing? You got to report it. If the people are buying the product, and they should also know where their money is going.
Thank you so much for your time, man. I want to end on last question is about the future. And I think what success, you've already had great successes in a lot of different areas. As you look maybe, 5 years down the line, even 10 years down the line, what are some of the goals and successes that you want Alaffia to achieve, or as a brand, as an organization? What do you see that look like? What do you hope it looks like when you look your vision about things? Usually it seems like your vision really comes to fruition a lot. So let's look at a decade down the line. What are you thinking about?
Thank you, Grant. Life organizations or visions, sometimes they can have shortcomings, then up and down. But what I would consider, like you said, the outlook, the positive one. There's two parts to it. It's not something that you can answer as one vision. The first part is that the Alaffia must continue the impact that it's doing today. So the vision is what it is, because we know now that it's working. So that must continue. So, but when I look forward, not only in terms of innovations, product are relevant to the need of the community around the world, not just America, to continue on those innovations. But even more importantly, is to me, is other organizations, other entities, to not just in Africa, but also here in the US, to adopt the Alaffia model, which is essentially, it's a business model. You can make money, but you have moral sense that you also contribute to your community. And I think that my vision, my hope, and at least as a legacy, is that we can have more and more organizations like Alaffia when I look 10 years down the road, or even 5 years.
One more question. I'm sorry. I wanted to.
That's okay.
I think about when we talk about the American consumer, right? We talk about the European consumer. What about sort of the African consumer, right? Do people in Africa like the brand as well, right? You always look at like you're selling the story and the vision to American consumers, right, or other consumers, but like, does it resonate with African consumers, right? Does it resonate there?
Certainly, and one thing that we can begin doing next year is actually distributing a Alaffia product within the continent.
Wow.
But that's just the product. But Alaffia is consumed in two different ways. I'm talking about real consumption. So in America, Australia, and South Korea, other places that we're very strong, the consumption of Alaffia is really about, here's a product that's healthy for me, that's doing good in the world. But today, within the West Africa, the consumption of Alaffia is it's more psychological. It's more of it represents a sense of hope. It's been consumed. We can use our indigenous ways to be part of global market. That's okay. We can make our own product, and then we can invest and build schools ourselves. Right? It is a psychological consumption of hope. That is what Alaffia represents within the West Africa, not the actual tangible product, because we're demonstrating that it's possible.
Well, I appreciate it so much, my man, for taking the time. This was a beautiful conversation, and I love hearing, the stories of business, right? The stories of like how we look at capitalism different, and how it can be done differently.
Yes.
It's not all evil of capitalism, which that part does exist, right? But there's this whole other part that is sort of being missed that the opportunity of, if we have visionaries like you and others
Thank you.
look at it differently, of the power in it. Think about what we just said. Like, a consumer in Olympia, Washington can buy a product off a shelf that could impact a life in West Africa,
Definitely.
right? Like, that's insane, right? That's incredible. That's a
But it's
great thing.
possible.
That's what I'm saying. It's so possible, and it's being done, man. And I just love it, man. This is what it's all
Thank
about,
you.
right?
Thank you, and that's the way it should be. And I said these at the beginning, and I'm going to say again to also thank you for to give us the opportunity to express what we stand for, what we're trying to do. It's not an easy journey, and you bring the world together. And we need that too. We need a glue. We need to glue all these together. So thank you for doing that, and for folks out there that are listening, is also to say that it's not an easy journey, but that doesn't mean that you cannot do it. If you have an idea, you should do it. You should explore it, but let it come from your heart. Because once it's coming from your heart, there's nothing that can stop you.
You can't fail. You can only learn when it comes from your heart, man. So thank you for the inspiration, man, and best of luck
Thank
the
you.
next year and the next decade, the next 50 years, my man. Just keep the vision alive and keep grinding. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll be grinding. There's no doubt about that.
Thanks everybody for listening to the episode. Just want to give a quick shout out to the Cause Artist partners, everyone who has signed up for it. Truly appreciate it. I will list a link in below so you can check them out. If you want to become a partner, just go to causeartist.com/partners. We'll talk soon. Thanks. Bye.